Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by this quarter's sponsor, Playground, the all-in-one childcare management software. We're all about managing monkeys and saving you time at your center. With this platform, you can. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at tryplayground.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
Welcome back to this week's conversation, and I am so excited to have Amy Cowan join us from Ivy Brook Academy.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and we're so excited because she's always traveling, but what I really love is in today's conversation about authority without apology, we are going to talk about Amy's parallel career paths and maybe what she learned in the first path that helped her on this second round journey. So with that, Amy, tell us a little bit about how you got into education, and then we'll have a conversation about where those paths led.
Sure. So I started as a public school teacher, graduated early from college and thought that I was going to be a classroom teacher. That was my career goal, and I was super excited to dive into that. And I did. And did that for about roughly 10 years. But
now, what age group did you have?
So I was a third grade teacher, but I also at times was an interventionist. So I always elementary age students that I worked
just
with.
Making sure, because, middle school teachers, They are a whole special breed.
Yes,
and
they are. Yes, they are. One time I did teach fifth grade in a middle school setting, and that was an eye opener for me. Those middle schoolers are definitely different, and those teachers are definitely different. It takes a very strong educator to do that.
I think it just takes a strong human. I don't even know if they have to be educators.
Even when you're raising them, they're tough.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay. All right. So we're going to jump off that because I could go down that rabbit hole really, really fast. So 10 years as an educator, where did you go from there?
So I was fortunate enough that I had a principal that really, really believed in me and saw me as a leader at an early age and began to put me in position to where I could gain better leadership skills. She sent me to conferences, let me present in front of the staff, all of that. And so I began after my, 10 or so years, maybe it wasn't quite 10, in the classroom, begin to take on some other leadership roles. That looked like I became an academic coach, an instructional coach for teachers. So then that just kind of added another layer. So then I stepped out of the classroom and stepped into a more leadership role. And then from there, I was given additional tasks, additional roles. Then I actually landed an administrator role in a public school system and was like, wow, this is where it's at. I'm really able to, have my gifts, my talents, things like that. But then at that time, my husband had a career change and said, hey, we're going to move to a different state. And so basically, whenever you're in the public school system, you are building yourself. And when you move to a different state, totally different network, you have to start over. And I took a job as a classroom teacher starting back at the beginning. It had some coaching role in it. I wasn't certified at that time in that state to be an administrator, so I knew I was going to have to work towards that. But
okay,
then,
so hang on.
Okay.
I got some questions for you because I'm reflecting and I'm kind of excited because I heard you say something. So first, you're the principal who inspired you, who kind of reached out, grabbed your hand to pull you along, was a female.
She was
very
strong female.
I love that because I think that's ultimately the goal all of us should be striving for, right? So as female leaders in any female-dominated industry, if we are identified as a leader or have a leadership role, I think it's our responsibility to lean back and grab the others coming up the ladder instead of going, oh, no, get off my ladder. And I think
absolutely
our responsibility as women is to lean back and grab that hand. I actually heard that analogy probably over 3 decades ago, from the woman who actually was in charge of the Borden Foundation. So if you remember, like
Okay.
Elmer's Glue and Borden
Mhm.
Milk, she started as the assistant, administrative secretary to the president of Borden Foundation, and
Mhm.
ultimately over 30 years became the president of the Borden Foundation.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, but that was the first time I'd ever heard somebody say it in a way that I got the visual. And
Mhm.
so I loved it. So if you are still thinking you're breaking glass ceilings, perfect. You go break it, but make sure you're holding somebody's hand. So,
Absolutely.
all
And
right. Well, I
she
love
didn't
that
just hold my
story.
hand. I mean, there are
She got back
many.
behind you and was doing
Well,
a little
she did,
push.
but she brought a lot of other women along with her. She didn't, it wasn't that she just saw that in me. She looked for that trait because she had worked so hard to get where she is. So many of us who were just educators under her are now in leadership roles in different places throughout Georgia and obviously throughout the United States. And so
Love that.
she was amazing. I learned from her to ask questions. I learned from her to have confidence. I learned also to accept challenges and be present all the time. That's what she was. She was present and she was ready and willing. And so I watched how she did it, and I watched how she had to fight to get even where she was. And so she inspired me and she believed in me. So from there, even I was not ashamed. It was fine with me to kind of step back when I started my career over after the move. But that landed me into my next role, which was a classroom teacher. And I thought, okay. And like I said, I was coaching a little bit as well in a public school system, and responded to an ad for Ivy Brook Academy. And it was advertised as, part day preschool. It was an administrator at their campus. And I thought, wow, this kind of sounds amazing. I could go back into the administrative role. It said it was part day. I would love to work part time. This is great. Lo and behold, that was not exactly how it all
You
added
you
up.
mean your role as an administrator in early child care was not part-time? I
It
don't believe
was
you.
not. It was not. I thought this just sounds amazing. And I went in, I interviewed, I absolutely fell in love with the school. Thought it was just amazing what I saw a 4-year-old at a workbench with a hammer and a nail and a 2x4, and I thought, wow, we never would allow something like this in public school. What's happening here? I have to know more. Took that role as an administrator. I was the assistant principal and the curriculum coordinator of Ivy Brook Academy in Weddington. And from there, my career has just taken off again, and I've rebuilt myself. And now I sit as the COO of our franchise company. So, quite the journey in the last 8 years with Ivy Brook.
So I'm gonna say something, and I'm sure you're probably
Sure.
going to correct me or help me understand. But I
Hmm.
think what's really, really cool is that you built yourself to this great role and you were willing to make a move with your family. And so you made that move with your family. Do you think that you got to where you are? Because 8 years seems like pretty fast to move to a COO of a franchise organization. And right now you guys have what, like roughly 60 brick and mortar locations and another
And
75 or so
yes.
contracted franchise agreements, right? Okay.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so, so if you're listening, this is not a small little mom and pop or even a medium size. I got 20 locations. This
Right.
is a franchise organization with over 60 current franchises, with another at least that many with signed agreements. So Amy is number 2 in the pecking order. And it's not that we don't like number 1, but we are talking about um, why it's okay to be number 2 and how women should be building each other up for that number 1 and number 2 space. And so
Hmm.
Amy has been willing to endeavor and engage in this conversation with me about that process. So you had a great female role model in the public elementary school. Were
Mhm.
there skills that you learned there that you applied? And if so, share those. If somebody's listening and they're like, well, I've been teaching for over 15 years and I've been a director for 5 or 6. I want to roll like Amy's. How do I get there?
So I know that I mentioned in the beginning the wonderful administrator that did see the potential in me, but I think also along the road, even moving from that district, I also had other females that I looked up to and that poured into me and saw my gifts and saw my talents. But also along that road, you're correct. Most all above an assistant principal, possibly a principal, everyone else was male. And yes, our CEO of Ivy Brook Academy is male. Um, One of the things that I think that kind of helped me within the Ivy Brook organization is because he has a co-founder that is his wife that also has great leadership qualities, right? So he wasn't afraid to take chances on a female that came into the Ivy Brook organization. Now, in terms of kind of telling and instilling in someone who's just sitting there thinking, can I move? Can I do this? Can I make the next move in my career? I think that you have to always be willing to say yes. And you have to always be willing to take that risk. And you have to put yourself out there. When I came on board with Ivy Brook, I remember there were things, a lot of public school experience that I brought with me in terms of operations, in terms of how to run schools very well, how to handle teams of people. And so I could have just sat in my small little assistant principal office and done exactly what I was hired to do, but I was more outspoken. I took risks. I, very gently said, "Hey guys, I have an idea." I didn't. I was confident in the ideas that I was bringing, and it wasn't. I never wanted to seem bossy or intrusive, or because what they were doing was already beautiful. I just wanted to be able to express my ideas, and I think that if you do that in a respectful way, then it lands well, right? And every company, whether or not you're a private company like we are, a franchise company, or whether or not you're in public education or healthcare, it's it's often in how you package your ideas and how you present yourself that is important in this. And I also, when I walk into a room that's full of gentlemen, which that does happen even in my industry, right? Then I feel as equipped, as confident, and as intelligent, all of the things as they are. And I make sure that I'm presenting myself that way.
So when you say presenting yourself that way, I'm sure
Hmm.
that is more than just language. It's probably even more than just the clothes on your body. What does that mean to you? In other words, again, somebody who's listening to this might be in their 30s.
Hmm.
Most of we got 125 countries that listen.
Right.
What else could impact that confidence level? I got all kinds of ideas, but I want to hear yours.
So I think it's an entire package, right? Obviously, that's the easiest part, right? You want to dress the role, but it's really what's inside of you. So it's the mental part of making sure that you're in the headspace to be able to talk intellectually to people, but it's again, confidence, I think, is one of the biggest drivers in women succeeded in any industry and pushing themselves forward. Because if you are confident, even if you don't know something, yet you're poised as being confident and ready and willing, that goes a long way. So I think it is. I think that you have to make sure that you articulate who you are, why you're there, what your goals are, and I think that you have to make sure that you have done your homework. That's also part of this is like you have to know who you're. I, I was set up for a pretty big meeting maybe about a year and a half ago. And I knew that the meeting was going to be predominantly men in the room. And so I did my homework. I wanted to know. I stalked their LinkedIn. I did because I wanted to make sure that I could speak intelligently, have conversation. You have to be able also to have clear conversations with strangers sometimes in order to elevate yourself. And you can't shrink. You can't shrink. You have to be bold, but not bossy.
I love that, bold, not bossy.
Hmm.
I'm going to use that somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I know that I sometimes see, especially in females in leadership, especially in our industry, because it's
Hmm.
not something that we're generally encouraged to do.
Right.
But were you involved in local chambers of commerce and in the industry organizations? Where did you get the practice of having these conversations with complete strangers about topics that you're not really sure that you were 100% ready to have?
Well, this is going to sound, here I'm trying to sound very professional and polished, but I'm going to take a little step back, and I have this little thing inside my brain that says, fake it until you make it
Fatumi.
sometimes.
I
Yep.
call that the Fatumi method.
Yes.
Because if you
So,
spell it out, fake it till you make it is
yep.
Fatumi.
And
So,
so I think that isn't, you have to have, again, I know that I continue to say the word confidence. And so maybe I should even step back and kind of think about, how do you build confidence?
Mhm.
How do you, as a woman, feel confident walking into these spaces to speak to others or to elevate your career or to speak up for yourself? And I think that is, that's through your own learning. People that are listening to your podcast, right? They're listening to your podcast because they're wanting as much information as they can possibly get. And so I think it is through making sure that you are not just educated with your college degree, but that you are putting yourself in situations that stretch you and that grow you. And so whether or not that is joining the Chamber of Commerce. Now, I wasn't doing that when I was in my public school career. I didn't need to do that. But was I in other organizations? Yes. Did I make sure that if there was something that needed to be volunteered for, to speak here or to lead this, I was always doing that, because what that also does, if you take those opportunities, you're being put in front of many, many different individuals of all different walks of life, all different cultures. In different leadership roles. And if you watch those folks and if you listen and you learn, that all pours into you. So I would see things that other leaders did really well, and I would say, I'm going to do that. Or, you know what? That was impressive. I really thought and I would put that in my own toolbox. And that's how the whole confidence builds, when you are continuing to grow and stretch yourself professionally, and put yourself out there. And also, the other thing, Kate, that I think is so important is that as a good leader, you have to be confident with knowing that there are many other people that are way smarter than you that might not even be above you, right? And you have to be willing to listen and learn from them to just continue. Your skill set is always being built. You cannot be stagnant.
I love that. So I often use the term utility belt, mostly because I do have a little superhero thing and I love superheroes. But I also know that I don't have any superhero powers. So, consider me Batgirl, and that I'm going to go find all the fancy tools I can put on my utility belt, because um, I've had the same tools in my toolbox since I was in high school, and my toolbox looks like it's probably since I was in high school. And so I got to, embrace some new visual for myself. But I love that. I love the thought of encouraging folks to, if somebody has to go speak, volunteer to be that person to go speak. And that takes me back to one of my, like, when I first remember ever taking stage, and I'm going to end with my one little tiny story, is I was 14. I was the
Okay.
MC of a Girl Scout award ceremony. And
Okay.
I am sitting in this meeting, and there were all of these women in leadership roles in the community. They were leading this organization, but nobody wanted to be the MC. And I went, I'll do it. Now, I was 14. I did not know I should not have said, I'll do that. Right. So here I am. I am a high school freshman.
Right.
And I'm like, I'll do it. And I did it. And I absolutely loved it. And I thought it was the best thing ever. Now, if you had ever asked me if I'd ever want to do any sort of theater or anything like that, I'm like, I'm not doing that in front of people. Now, I will happily stand in front of 5,000 people and talk and MC an event or facilitate a small community group of people with way more letters before and after their name than me. And I just kind of go, well, you put your pants on the same way I do. Right. So like we all have a different version of that confidence and where that comes from. And a lot of times we're inspired because somebody else in the room didn't stand up. And so if you see that pause, don't wait for the guy next to you. And I am going to say it that way because I've sat in nonprofit board meetings. There's one guy in the room, and that's the guy that gets elected to president because he said he wanted the role. Now, there were 10 other women who were more than capable, who might have even had more experience in doing what they were doing, but they didn't say, I want it. And I think what you kind of said was maybe
you have to be willing also. And I'm glad that you just told that story because what you did was you made yourself uncomfortable. At 14 years old, you were willing to be uncomfortable and volunteer to do that. And I think that when things like are presented to us, if it makes you a little uncomfortable, then you're probably being stretched and you should take the challenge. So be uncomfortable and do it.
Absolutely. And the really funny thing is that somebody will say something like that to me. And I'm like, I don't think at 14, I knew I was supposed to be uncomfortable.
Well, look at you now hosting podcasts.
I was more like, why don't you want to do it? Like, I couldn't understand.
That's awesome.
Right? Like, I was an only kid. And, when I went to a high school with, 1,500 students and, a while ago. And so it wasn't like I sat there and went, oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. It was like, there was a gap. Nobody stepped up for it. And I'm like looking around and like, none of the women wanted, like none of the moms, the older women, aunts, uncles, grandmas, or aunts, grandmas, right? Nobody else was saying that they wanted to do it. They were all saying why they couldn't. Right. And I was like, well, that seems silly. I can do that. Right. Like, cause I was like, well, what do I have to do? And they told me and they're like, and we'll even give you a script. And I'm like, okay, like I don't even have to and it wasn't at the time. Like, I'm sure that, I know award shows were around. Right. And I know that I probably watched them. But I don't know if I actually associated myself with, I'm playing the role of Billy Crystal, right? Like I never really thought of myself as the award host kind of thing, which now I might be going, I'm not sure I can be a Billy Crystal or a Robin Williams or, I'm not really sure that's me, but I'm happy to jump in. And now people will tell me I'm going to jump into my Julia Sugarbaker age, mostly because people will see me in a red suit. And if I get the 80s hair going, watch out, Julia Sugarbaker, right? And I have no problems with carrying that tone. So I'm
can
sure that
definitely
anybody who's
see
listening to that episode who's like, oh, I've seen that, they're going to be like, I'm going to get comments about my Julia Sugarbaker era. And, Dixie Carter was great, right? And so if I guess I'm going to have to channel my inner, I was fine until I found out how old she was when she filmed that. And I was like, I'm too old to apparently be Julia Sugarbaker because she was like 43 when she started that role. And I was like, all right, well,
what a good show to even reference when you're talking about women, in position. And I think that's an amazing reference for sure.
I'm hoping that everybody who's listening to this who has absolutely no idea what I'm talking about will go watch Designing Women and go find some Julia Sugarbaker outtakes.
Agreed.
Because that character, that role, the actress just did a wonderful job. So
absolutely.
Well, Amy, I think we're going to have you back because this has been a great conversation. And I know there are more things that we could talk about. And
I will be your guest anytime.
I don't know. You may regret saying that. Of course, then we got to figure out how to get that on the calendar. And so that is its own, Tetris adventure in itself.
For sure.
But Amy, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, hopefully you will stay around and listen to us in a few more days. If you don't already follow our newsletter, there's always tips that aren't in the episodes, as well as we don't tell you everything that's in the episode ahead of time. So go to childcareconversations.com, sign up for the newsletter list, and we will see you in a few days.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Childcare Conversations.